Welcome to the Energizing America podcast, where we talk all things energy, why we need it in our business and communities and our daily life. Excited today to sit down. Of course, everyone knows Mr. John Hiivala, so welcome back, John. We're going to co-host this one with Daniel Yates, a blue-collar champion. So welcome, Daniel.
Nice. Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it. And I don't know how often I get called a blue collar champion, but I do love blue collar people.
Here's the deal, Daniel. We need more people, and sometimes if you just give them the right title, they'll people will pay attention. So I throw out titles all the time just to get people's attention. So as long as they heard the blue collar piece, the champion word worked, right? So because you are in the marketing space with blue collar, and from what I've understood, you grew up in Texas. You had a data analyst for a dad and a stay-at-home mom, and something ended up fascinating you about this industry and especially big equipment. What led you to where you are now? And maybe what we should start out with is, where are you? What are you up to?
Yeah. So as of right now, my wife and I, we own a company called Blue Collar Brands, and we essentially help good blue collar companies who care about their people show off what the hell it is they do. And the reasoning and our North Star behind that is to help blue collar people feel seen, valued, and heard, because they do really important work. They lay the groundwork for every basic need in life, and every piece of infrastructure in our country. But people don't really thank them for it. And a lot of the time they get looked down on. And so our goal is to kind of reverse that mindset and really make it, it is an honorable thing to do, but really help other people see that. And so coming from my background, I didn't realize what all went into being able to turn on my lights, flush my toilet, turn on the water, my house not flooding whenever it rains. I didn't understand that. And I'm beginning to understand it a lot more now, but kind of to go back a little bit, I picked up a camera in high school and I basically fell in love with taking pictures of things. And after high school, I started a video production company. And about 3 years into that, I had a local civil construction company that they did a lot of subdivision, utility work, and earth moving as well. And they reached out and said, "Hey, we'd like to make a video." And I was kind of confused because I didn't know the first thing about, how a subdivision was built, or you don't see anything if you're not in the blue collar world. You don't see anything except for the houses starting to go up, right? You don't realize, oh, somebody has to come in here and actually prep the ground. Somebody has to come in and put in storm sewer, to come in and put, your actual sewer, your water lines, your electrical, all of that goes underground first, right? You only think about it when something's wrong. And so I went on site, and I just remember being enamored with the scale of the project, the scope, and that it happens right under society's nose. It happened, the project that I went to, the first project I ever went to, was 5 minutes from the house I grew up in. I didn't know the first thing about it, right? But it's right there, it's right next to everybody. And then the second thing was, obviously the heavy equipment is really badass, and you can't really go wrong walking up to a big excavator and seeing them dig a trench, or walk up to a loader and see how big that thing is. Like, it was just fascinating. I didn't really know much about it, but I knew it was cool. And then the third thing, and the biggest thing for me, was the people. And it was I didn't grow up with my parents telling me, "Hey, avoid blue collar people," or anything like that. But there's this societal stigma that if you work in the blue collar world, or you work in trades, that you maybe didn't go to school, or you're not very smart, or you ran out of luck. And it's a dumb stigma, because I realized that day, I was like, man, these people are the nicest people that I'll ever meet. I would talk to somebody for 10 minutes and they give me the shirt off. And so when I realized that, and really put two and two together, that society doesn't value these people that literally built society from the ground up, something needs to change. And so now, today, fast forward again, we go in and we do photo and video work, and we build websites and help companies with social media so that they can present, their people as the heroes of our society, so they feel valued and seen.
It's been interesting to watch on LinkedIn, especially, which is one of my big uses, I guess, really my only primary use of social media. And to see the transition, and you never know what the algorithms behind the scenes. Am I seeing more stuff about blue collar worker because I'm interested in it, or is it truly like picking up speed, right? But watching your posts and hearing your true passion through your posts is pretty dang cool. And I hope we can continue to get more folks realizing, because you mentioned this, that you didn't realize right underneath your nose how much work goes into getting the utilities to your house. In our industry, specifically in the oil and gas industry that we participate in, there's much of the same lack of knowledge that people just don't know. And recently I seen one of your posts where it talked about folks not wanting to be in the dirt world because of the environmental impacts. That's an example of maybe just a flat misunderstanding of the work that they're doing, and how prideful they should be that they're doing the work and they're actually doing it in a positive way with the right tools, and doing it in a way that we can all be proud of. I see you have an excavator behind you even, and that's how proud you are of the blue collar work. So yeah, I think it's great. So you mentioned, what goes into it, being underneath you as a surprise. And one of the things I wanted to ask about is, that was the first thing, and then the second thing was the big equipment really fascinates you. But the third one, the people piece, and especially with John in the room, that John already knows what kind of people work in Wescom and the kind of blue collar people we've been able to surround ourselves with. And you kind of touched on it a little bit, that they're the kind of people who give a shirt off their back to you. And I think, John, we can agree that's what we found in the blue collar workforce.
Oh, there's no question. It's a remarkable thing, and I think Daniel, you did an excellent job of laying out what it is about these people. But you're right; they're unsung heroes. Everything that we do, I go to the gas pump, pull up in my car, stick the nozzle in my tank, pump gas, don't think anything about it. I walk in the store, buy stuff. All that, everything was created by somebody with a hard hat on that did something to make that happen. And so often we forget about them people. So when I seen you, and you mentioned Aaron Witt, he's another great guy, Tyler Sassy, these guys that are really out there championing, however you say that word, the blue collar industry. It's just, that's the bus I want to get on and be a part of in some small way, because we have to sell that message and let people know the world is theirs for the taking at this point. There's such a demand for them. Excellent jobs, excellent benefits, excellent pay. Plus, you get to go home at the end of the day with a sense of satisfaction that I think it's hard to find anywhere else.
For sure. Yeah. Well, I couldn't agree more. And I think the interesting thing is to look back. We have a shrinking blue collar workforce today, but 100 years ago, where we're at in society today was built by the last 100 years of blue collar workers, right? And so they have worked so hard. They've worked their asses off to the point that we now have a society that not everybody has to go out and work with their hands. And that's really cool. Not everybody is capable of doing that. And back in the day, that was sometimes the only option for somebody, regardless of whether they were physically able to or whatever. But now we have, you can go get a job at a company, you can go sit at a desk if that's what you want to do. The issue is that I think as an a general, we'll generalize, I call it, as an industry, we haven't caught up with the other companies that we have basically allowed to happen, or brought to life through the infrastructure that we've built, right? So these software companies or an accounting firm, right, might be able to offer tons of great benefits and better pay, and people are more interested in going to work for them than they are for a blue collar company. I think for a few reasons. I think one, because they don't know that the blue collar world exists. Two, they don't understand that there's really meaningful work that they could do and they could enjoy their job more. But three, I think that there's more that we can do as an industry to actually match the same level of benefits and things that these other industries are offering. Because we sit here, and I think I'm going to generalize a little bit, but I think we go back and forth and try to one up our competition, right? Which is like, oh, the other. If I'm a small excavation company, right, I'm going to one up the other excavation company in my market and say, okay, we're going to pay you 50 cents more. Everybody come work here. Okay, but are you thinking about Starbucks? Are you thinking about Target? Are you thinking about these places that are going to pay the same amount and pay for these kids' college, or help them, with better insurance plans, and they don't have to go and work from, sun up to sundown? Like we've worked for the past 100 years to build a society to the level that we're at today, but I think that we've lagged behind now that society is getting ahead of us, and so I think we have to figure out how to go ahead and match that if we want to keep people coming. So
You
that's my
touched on an important point there, Daniel, because you said, like some of these other companies are actually paying for kids to go to college, right? And so part of our struggle has been like, how do we, and you had a great post on this on LinkedIn recently about how to invest in people. And you kind of related it to if you hire people for $1 and they come to work for $1, they're going to be willing to leave if somebody pays them a better dollar, whether it's 25 cents an hour, 50 cents an hour, whatever it would be. So you have to invest in your people. And one of the things that the blue collar industry as a whole can offer, and it doesn't matter if you're in the trades or if you're in the excavation or whatever, the blue collar workforce offers on the job paid training. Right. And that used to be something that we could differentiate ourselves with because you didn't find very many folks that offered paid college. When I went to college, I was working at Home Depot. They paid me, I think, 80% of my cost of tuition up to $2,000 at that time, 20 years ago, paid a significant amount of your college, right? It was something, but that was a rare deal. And that's why I went to work at Home Depot. And so I think as an industry, maybe we have to start acknowledging that maybe the on the job training, while it's great, is not all that much different than working at one of these other places where you get paid college, with one exception. When you are sitting, and it's an important exception, I believe, when you're sitting in college composition, you're actually not getting paid for that time. And it's probably a skill that ChatGPT is going to overtake before you know it, right? And if you're sitting, if you're a flagman out on an excavation project, the skill that you're learning about how the dozer has to keep his eye, the dozer operator has to have his eye on 15 different things going on. And at lunch, when you overhear him talk about how the machine controls or the GPS nuances or whatever the latest thing that he's talking about is, what you're learning is something that you're going to actually be able to use forever. ChatGPT is never going to take over that dozer, right? So I think on the job training is still one way to differentiate ourselves, but there's other ways that we can also invest in people. And maybe John, you can kind of speak to what are some of the ways beyond, like, for the blue collar workforce, what else have we found that we can show folks that we're investing in them?
Well, we talk a lot about it's all the little things, and it's basically the golden rule that if you care about people and you show them that you truly care about them, and whatever form that looks like to them are the things that keep people around. I think there's I just had a conversation with a guy yesterday, and he was talking about, hey, I'm working at X and I'm getting paid X, and if you guys can match it, then I'll come to work for you. And I said, to tell you the truth, we don't want you to come to work for us because of X, because of 50 cents or $1 or whatever. We know who we are. We feel like we're the best company around. We feel like at the end of the day, if you make a career out of it, even financially, you'll be better off at Wescom than anywhere else. But we are not getting into a bidding war. We're not interested in attracting people that are going to come for $1 an hour, because that means you'll leave for $1 an hour. We feel like we're a top tier company around, and we want to attract the right people. Well, today I got an email from them that Wescom's a company I want to work at. So I think that if we can take some time and actually talk to people, then with a little bit of dialogue, you find out what they're looking for and if it's the right fit. Because it's gotta be a win-win. If it doesn't win for both sides, then it doesn't work.
And it seems like in our industry, we have the flexibility a little bit more than the excavation businesses to take that time and work with these folks individually, like to explain that story and to tell them that we care more about them than the work they do. Like, because our industry, specifically electrical roustabout, HVAC style work, we've had this workforce shortage since, I mean, I've been at this 9 years, and that's the one challenge. I don't care how many people we hire or what we do, we haven't been able to fully overcome, right? And John, you've been a few years now, and it never changes. We have that shortage. In the excavation industry, you got all these ma and pa shops, right, that scraped through a living, and now they're just now, it feels like, waking up to this massive challenge. And I think that if we lump us all together as blue collar industry, we can actually help each other solve this problem because some of us might be further along in the journey than others. So when we talk about investing in people, that's the one thing that comes to mind is that taking the time to visit with that person to see what they're actually about rather than the dollar bill. And so I've adopted this saying like, I care more about you than the work you do. And I think that's a little bit different in the dirt world. Am I correct in that, Daniel?
Yeah, I think so. I think that the dirt world's a little bit more behind than some of the other blue collar industries. I think that that's a really good point. We look at other companies that, in our same markets, right, as competitors rather than people who can aid us. And we look at other industries as, oh, well, they might recruit my potential excavator operator might go work for this company because they need somebody to go and trench to put cable in, right? You look at it as a competition when really we all have to work together because this is not something that we can just slide through or try to get by. It's not like we can just pinch pennies and we'll get through this because the issue is only getting worse. And so I fully agree with you. I think that as an industry we all have next generation of workforce to come in because the issue is that older folks are getting out.
At an alarming rate, it feels like. All of a sudden, I was just talking to our accounts payable or receivable gal this morning, and I was telling her, Pam, I remember in high school hearing about this issue that's going to come when the baby boomers retire. Well, it turns out that teacher was fairly well spot on. It's a real issue. They're all retiring, and guess what? They all had the blue collar skills, something that most folks when we're going through school, we're not told that even matters. And in fact, brings me to my next question: is it when we're going through our traditional school system, it's almost like, how dare you not go to college, right? There's very little talk about this other side where you could actually go into the trades and have meaningful work and do good things. And I think one of the things that was lacking for so long was like pride in what we do. So we've covered like who are the people in this industry. There are hardworking people who give the shirt off your back. I'm also going to argue that they're the kind of folks that'll work in pouring rain, 30 below zero. We've seen out in North Dakota, our team's working, John. We've been on pads in New Mexico where it's over 100 degrees and they're sweating underneath their hard hat. And by the way, they're not only doing that for a couple hours, folks. They're doing that from like 6 o'clock in the morning to 6 o'clock at night. And oh, by the way, at 2 o'clock in the morning when the ship can't leave the harbor, guess who's out there 100 feet up in the air making sure that ship loader gets rebooted, right? And in Duluth, Minnesota, it just might be 40 below with a howling wind. And that's no lie. And when that ship's got to go, it's got to go, right? The Soo locks just opened up. Come on. Toledo, Ohio needs iron ore. That's as far as our guys think. So they're loading. But there's another sense of this that these people have to have pride in what they do. They don't need an ego. You had another post about this that I really appreciated. That you got to get your people to have pride, and not the kind of pride that drives ego, but take pride in like their craftsmanship and their creativity and their ability, right? And I think once we do that, once we show people, because honestly, these kind of folks that are working in the blue collar industry are some of the most humble people you'll ever meet. They're not going to you're not going to find them at their dinner table at Thanksgiving when their cousin who's a doctor is across the way and telling grandma how she could actually have a better hip. Grandma, the kid who just worked out in an oil field is not relating that I should tell grandma that the only way you're going to get that hip is by the hospital having heat, which by the way, they use coal or ore or iron or whatever the natural fossil fuel is, right? So we gotta get that pride within them.
And I think a big part of that is recognizing that, okay, these folks aren't going to go and tell grandma that they powered the hospital. And I think there's two parts to it. Number one, that pride isn't necessarily there. They're not thinking about where their work goes, 5 years down the road. Is this project that I'm working on going to? What is this pipeline going to, actually provide? What is this, energizing this solar project, right? What is this really going to do? And I think that as a company, we have the opportunity to inspire and encourage people to really recognize the value in the work that they're doing. And because it's purposeful, meaningful work, but just because it's purposeful, meaningful work does not mean that everybody recognizes and realizes that when they have to get up at 4 a.m. to get to their job an hour and a half away. It's just not always on their mind. And so I think the way that we not only, and I think this brings up conversation, but not only the way that we attract people is by building pride in the people that we already have, and then helping share that with society. So society understands, oh, this is the value that they're bringing. But also, that's how we retain people, because at the end of the day, how we treat the people that we have right now absolutely affects the trajectory of whether they're going to stay in the blue collar world or not. If they're going to leave for Starbucks or for Target or for a job at right? Because we can treat them well or we can treat them poorly. And if we don't help them understand that what they're doing is important and then also treat them well, they can be treated well elsewhere.
Yeah, society has changed in the sense that today you can go anywhere and get a job and make money. So you got to find out and sell the why. The why behind the story of the money is a big part of the puzzle for sure.
And I've been accused of being an exaggerator at times, and I do. I exaggerate things to make points. And I think at some point when I realized, like, why are we having a hard time attracting people to come work in oil and gas? Well, my kids are coming home from high school talking about how I'm a baby killer and everything in between, right? And until you have to like stretch that out and say, wait a second. Certainly, there's impacts and trade-offs in everything we do, but your teacher actually wouldn't even be able to say that if she wasn't able to properly be dressed to go to work. And guess what? Most of what you're wearing is full of oil. People don't know that, but that's the reality of it, right? And so you got to stretch that and make people think about that. And in today's world, we're very short-sighted, we're social media fanatics, we're TikTokers, everything is in 15-second blocks. We're not actually thinking about tomorrow and the next day and at the end of our life, being able to look back. I had a banker today email me and say he's retiring, and this particular individual has helped out countless people. I even know our own employees. I've referred this bank to him for mortgages, and oftentimes it's their first time home buying, and he's been great for him. And I told him, I hope you can slide into retirement feeling good about the work you did, because that's like a lot of people struggle when they run into retirement, right? But blue collar workers, they retire like the most happy people. Why? Because they've already done all their meaningful work. And that's not to knock a CPA. Maybe that's what your calling is, and go do it. You can have meaningful work too. But if you're doing it simply because grandma told you that's what you should do, and even worse, they paid for you to do it, and so now you're just miserable for 25 years, you're going to try and go retire, and you're going to end up going crazy, and you're going to be a Walmart greeter or whatever the situation is, not because you want to, but because you're looking for some fulfillment because you lacked it along the way. So I think inspiring and encouraging our people to understand that story is so important for us as we go forward. I gotta believe, as an owner of a media or creative consulting marketing agency in this blue collar world, I just think about us, John. Right? We've had folks come in and try and help us out with their marketing, and I call myself the psychotic CEO, but it's pretty true. It's hard to sell me something, and especially when it comes to marketing, right? You've got to have some challenges convincing some of these dirt folks to get on board, to embrace social media, to do a website. What's that been like? Do you have any success stories?
Yeah, so really the cool thing is that, over the past, I've been doing this for almost 5 years, I think now, in the blue collar world. And over the past 4 or 5 years, like the sentiment towards, showing off your people and towards, social media and using marketing in the construction world, and mainly, I'll say mainly, the marketing is for hiring and retention. It's not your traditional, oh, we need to go get leads, we need to find more customers, because those typically already exist. You have your relationships, you have your business development, whatever, but the marketing side is really there so that you can attract and retain the right people. So I think over the past 4 or 5 years, there's been a huge shift. I think, you look at BuildWit, you look at a few other folks who are doing the same thing, essentially having pushed the industry along to say, hey, no, like, here's a few companies that are doing this, that are leading the charge, usually young owners, honestly, who recognize and understand the value of, using social media, or people are Google searching them if they, when they're looking for a job, right? They want to see your website. That's changed a lot over the past 4 or 5 years. Thankfully, when I got into it, though, there were enough people already looking into it that I've never really had to sell my services to any. It's always been, hey, we want to talk to you. Hey, we're interested in doing this or that. And then what it comes down to a lot of the time is me sort of consulting or coaching them towards, hey, this is the right way to, because we're not going to do it the corporate, I call it the corporate bullshit marketing way. Where it's, we're not going to do things how a software company would do it, because that's not what's people in the blue collar world. It's just not. We're not selling shoes. We're selling a job and a career and something that actually matters.
I think that's why it's important. Every post that I've seen of yours has a piece of equipment with somebody who's proud of the work they do. And I think we've found the same, John, that our social media and all of our marketing efforts are tied to how can we show people who we are so that when they decide that this is for them, they call on us.
Absolutely. And I think you were part of that conversation where I don't remember the guy's source, but he had a survey in America where the happiest people in the country make $80,000 a year and go home at the end of the day with dirt underneath their fingernails. And essentially, that's the blue collar world. And if you look at, I think one of the last things I seen was we're over 500,000 people short in the blue collar industry today. And that number, like you mentioned earlier, the baby boomers going up, that number is only growing. And the problem's only going to continue to evolve. So we have to do a much better job of letting people know what's out there.
I think it even goes to sometimes we have to change our opinion on how we do things, right? Like, we want a resume, we want this big application, fill it out, we're going to do all this stuff. Your average blue collar worker is like, anyways, can I just call you? And like, can I just call you, please? And that's what we find, John, is you're having a lot of conversations with just people, like, because it turns out that's the kind of people that are in this industry. They're not essay writers. They want to get on a piece of equipment, whether it is to trench a wire in or pull cable or hook up some piping or whatever it is. And so I think we have to remember that flexibility piece of being open enough so that folks do come find us.
Oh yeah,
Absolutely.
because if we're doing the same thing that everybody else is doing, but we have longer hours and harsher elements and worse work environment, less safe work environments, like that's all people see, then of course they're never gonna fill out the long. They're not. So how do we have to make it easy. We have to make it smooth and seamless for people to get here, right?
Right, exactly.
I think it does start with changing our minds on a lot of things.
Have you seen that it truly does inspire the people? Like when you're out taking photos and video shots of the big earth moving that's happening, are you getting the sense from the folks that are in that equipment? Well, maybe they're camera shy. They're actually kind of feeling some pride in what they're doing. That someone's actually taking time to photograph them.
Yeah, so you would be surprised. I think a lot of people assume that everybody's camera shy. And like you'll have somebody from time to time who, kind of takes a little while to warm up. But as soon what the order in which I do things is I show up, I walk up, I usually will signal, hey, I want to talk to the operator, or I want to talk to you, like let's chat for a second. And I just try to explain whoever I'm taking the picture of, hey, this is why I'm here. And as soon as I explain to them, hey, your work is really important. Society has no idea what you're doing. I'm here to show it off. Your company wants to show off who you are and what it is you're doing and tell your story. Their whole demeanor changes. There's people who I've walked up to and they've been like, what can I do for you? Basically, like assuming that I'm just gonna ask them for help with something, but then I explain them to that, and they're like, oh, let me pose in front of my truck. Let me go do this. And they get so excited about it because truly nobody around them except for their coworkers, their family doesn't even usually know what it is they do every day, and that's a lonely thing, really. So being able to have somebody show up and be like, hey, I actually want to show off what you're doing every day. You're a professional. You've been doing this for 25 years and nobody ever sees it or realizes the value in it. I'm going to give you the time of day to show off that value and help you feel like, yeah, what I'm doing really matters. It makes a big difference. It really does. And I don't say that as like a sales tactic. Like I want people to hire me to go take pictures of their people. I'm saying that because I've seen it happen countless. I've seen, people, I'll see people a second or a third time, months down the road and be like, hey, I saw that picture you posted of me, and it just got me so excited about my job. And it sounds cliche, but it works. So,
It's funny because oftentimes in like the dirt world or the electrical world, like it's a wire running in a cable tray. Like what's so cute about it, right? So it's hard to even market that in traditional marketing efforts, but it's really not that much different to market a pair of shoes. Think about how much more willing we would be to buy if we knew the story behind the people that we're buying from. it's such an important piece, and that's why I say that we care more about the person than the work they do, because honestly, it's knowing who that person is that is actually doing that work and why they're doing it that drives us to keep doing what we're doing. Is there a difference between the older people and the younger people when you come out with the camera?
I would say there's a difference in, like, you can obviously tell there's a generational difference, like in terms of kind of how they interact or how they talk sometimes, but honestly, there's not a big difference. And I think what I think I've figured out is that in the construction world, or whatever it is, if you're out working with your hands with a group of people, you have to communicate way differently than you have to communicate in an office or behind your desk on Zoom meetings or whatever it is, right? Like, you are using your hand, you're using hand signals, you're yelling across the job site, you're way more, you have to be yourself. You're there 12 hour, 10, 12 hours a day sometimes with these people, and they're your family, and so I think that everybody kind of rubs off on each other, and they all kind of act pretty similarly, honestly, and they are all very comfortable together. So there's really not, even if you do come into a company and you're, let's say you're a 25-year-old and you come into a company and you're surrounded by 50-year-olds, really not, it's not like if you went into an office with a bunch of 50-year-olds, you're not going to feel the same. You're going to feel part of the family. That's what I've seen.
It's funny you mentioned that. I'm going to kick this over to John for a story of one of our New Mexico electrical managers from when he did some service overseas, and I think what we can boil this down to is, like, literally, when you're working out on a construction site, your life truly depends on the communication with the person that's in that backhoe. And so having that reality check, all of a sudden you don't really care what kind of deodorant he's wearing or what kind of perfume she has on. Like, it's just not that important. You just want to make sure you got eye contact going on, right? Because I'd rather not be in that trench. Or how is that not what we heard our Permian manager sum it up for us, John?
That's a fact. That's a fact. That reminds me of one little story he said when he went over there talking about fitting in with the people in different cultures, and you don't know till you know. Is they went to this village, and in the country he was in, what happens if they feed you and you finish your plate? That means bring more. Well, I guess this food was horrendous, but trying to be polite, they kept finishing their plates, not realizing they're literally running these people out of food, and the food is horrible. So, trying to assimilate and be part of something is a natural thing. But when you don't understand the rules, it's easy to be doing the total wrong thing when you're just trying to fit in. And I think that's one great thing about the blue collar world, is there's so many people out there willing to teach. No, nobody in our world, nobody starts out on day one as a journeyman electrician, right? It's this act that happens, and it takes a certain amount of time, and you have to be taught, and you have to have people willing to teach you. So then that day comes when you're a journeyman, you owe it to the next generation of people coming up to try teaching them. Not, hey, go over there and work on that panel, to Joe Blow on his first day. That doesn't work. You got to show up on the site, figure out what's going on, whether you want to eat the whole plate of dinner or not, and go to work.
I like that. I think that's a great analogy.
So are we finding in the dirt world that that's what we're experiencing is, and I know BuildWit has some really cool stuff that they're doing on the training, but are you finding that the young folks are leaning on the older ones for that training?
Yeah, so it's interesting. It's obviously depend. I can't really generalize it. I don't want to lump all young folks into a group and all older folks into a group, right? I think that I would more so categorize it into schools of thought. On the young folks side, I think that there are tons of young folks who come in and are just hungry to learn and really interested. And I think most people who come into the industry young are in that boat. I think that there are people in another boat where they have worked a couple jobs and they've had either a terrible foreman, or they've had, uncommunicative superintendent, or they've had somebody who is just telling them, hey, this is how you do your job, and it's not right, it's not accurate, or, they're not treated well. And then they kind of just check. And so I think you see both of those. You see people who become complacent or become kind of lazy and not really interested, but the majority are still really interested in learning and want to hear what people have to say, even if they've had those negative experiences. But I think it's on the older folks to go and teach and go and tell. And I think there's two schools on the older side, right? Where there's folks who've been in the industry and well, their foreman threw their hard hat at them, and that's how I'm going to teach everybody, because that's how they learned how to do it. Nobody gave them proper leadership training. Nobody gave them, we don't train our we don't you don't train a journeyman electrician, right, necessarily to go and train somebody younger. You train them how to do electric, but they're not a teacher. They're not certified in how to properly teach somebody. That's part of their job. And so however they were taught by the master or the journeyman above them, when they were taught, is how they're going to go about teaching the person below them. And so I think you see a lot of older folks who are really interested and really willing and recognize, okay, there's not enough people coming. We need to pass this on, and they're at the point in their career where they're like, man, I've built projects, but I want to build people. And there's still some outliers though who are like kind of old mentality, and it's not that they're bad people. It's not that they don't care about the younger folks. It's just that they only know what they know. They only know how to treat people the way that they were treated.
Yeah, I think I had an older fella tell me one time, and I use older loosely because unfortunately I don't even know if I can, it's pretty much my age anymore. But he told me, Shane, do I want to go teach him how to do it the way you want me to? No, I don't. Because my nature is I would just go up to him and yell at, similar to what you said, throw my heart at. But he said, so I don't want to, but I'll also tell you I need to, because I care about this industry enough and the future of this country enough that I do need to show him. And if it means that I have to change my ways, I guess so be it. And I thought that was pretty cool of somebody who had been, brought up through the ranks and done his time, that he was willing to acknowledge that maybe I don't want to, but I need to. And I've thought oftentimes throughout life, like, what if we looked at everything that way? That quit looking at it as a want, or even if you don't want to do it, look at it from more of a need standpoint. You had another great post a few days ago about this subject, and that's why I brought it up. You had kind of talked about you gave some tips to the older ones and the more experienced ones, like, please be patient with these fellas, please be willing to share your knowledge, treat them with respect. And then at the same time, you told the younger ones that, be humble, and don't just be teachable. And I really loved this one. You said, don't just be teachable, seek instruction and responsibility. And I think that's where John and I have seen sometimes the difference between someone who is going to go through leadership roles, because I don't want to say go somewhere in life, right? Because very importantly, an apprentice electrician for 40 years, you're still doing very impactful work and energizing somebody's future somewhere. But if you're going through the leadership, you've got to be willing to not just be teachable, but seek it. And I think, John, we've seen that kind of a shift in the younger generation, or the folks that are more coming out, like, they don't just want to be taught, but they're like yearning for it. They're like asking us for it. We get a lot of folks who are like, what training do you offer? That's different than what we had 9 years ago. I never had that question asked of me.
Yeah, there's a hunger. And there's two things I tried to teach my kids, whether I did or I didn't, I don't know, but it's effort and attitude. And if you show up every day and you're trying and you got a good attitude, people are willing to help you and they are willing to teach you. And you'll always be successful, in my opinion. It's a generalization, I understand. But if you show up and you're doing the bare minimum and you got a poor attitude, then yeah, I don't know how much out of my way I'm going to go to try to help you learn the skill set. So you're right. It goes back to both parties. Both sides have a responsibility to work together to make it better. There's no question.
I liked the way Daniel ended that post when he said, give respect, talking about the young people, that give respect regardless of whether you receive it or not. I think that's another important piece, because when you're new and you come into the blue collar field, we can talk all we want and brag and post pictures and everything, but everyone knows that social media can have a positive look that maybe when you pull back the curtain isn't all that cute, right? Sometimes there's hidden truths in social media that are not portrayed. So I think our younger folks, or folks who are more used to social media, could possibly look at a post of a company bragging about their people and be like, yeah, another day, another dollar. If I go work there, when I actually get there, it's going to be a different story. And I know within our business, we strive really hard not to do that. And I think the folks that we're connected with also take great pride in being who they represent themselves as being. But I still think no matter what, as we enter the workforce, it's a very important set of advice that give respect regardless of whether you receive it or not, because the individual, you never know what they've went through and what kind of tribulation they had to do to go through, to get to where they are. And now there's a new person on the job, and that can be difficult. You're operating a dozer, and you just finally got the person that was your spotter all trained up and doing an awesome job. And unfortunately, he got promoted into a equipment operator, and now you're back to training another person. And so it can be easy to be short with that person you're training. And as a result, the person who's getting trained can feel like, well, why would I work with him? He's just a jerk. But
Yeah.
it's really an important piece. And then you said future leaders must desire to be great leaders. And I think that piece is extremely important. When you think of the word leader, what were you saying when future leaders must desire to be great leaders?
Well, I think it starts from the mindset that anybody can be a leader. But ultimately, what I'm thinking of is if you want to be someone who impacts and affects the way that things go on your job site, or wants to help basically make a positive impact, that to me is what a leader should seek to do. A good leader seeks to make a positive impact, and really that's kind of what I was thinking about, is like, if I want to make a positive impact, then I should want to make the best positive impact that I possibly can. If I want to be a leader in the future, I want to be the best leader I can.
Do you ever get sick of bragging about these blue collar workers?
No. I get fatigued on my job sometimes because I do it a lot, but no, not with the people, because at the end of the day, I mean, I go and I get to talk to, there will be days where I go out on site and I talk to 15 to 20 people, and I give them 10 to 15, and I hear their story. And at the end of the day, I can be exhausted because, man, that's a lot of talking. I'm an introvert. I know it probably doesn't sound like it. I get really excited talking about this stuff, but I'm an introvert, truly. So for me, talking to 15 to 20 people can be really tiring, at the end of the day, having a deep conversation. But no, I find so much purpose and value in what I do, because